Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to give it a couple minutes before we start so we can allow people to log in. But welcome to the Graduate School webinar for NUFP Fellows. Just going to give it another minute here while folks are still logging in, and we'll get started very soon. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Spencer Long, and I am leading today's webinar with two very awesome special guests, Arlene and Oscar, who we will let them introduce themselves here in a second. I just want to go over some of the features with the webinar if you're having any troubles or trying to figure out some things. I do want to point out when you logged in on the right side of your screen, there should be a menu bar that allows you to a bunch of different choices. But one of the things I did want to check out was if you look at handouts and you click the little arrow, there is a handout that we'll share at the end of the presentation, but wanted y'all to have it available at your disposal. And then also there is a chat feature at the bottom where you can submit questions to the, or there's a way that you can submit questions to the poll here that everyone can see. So if you have questions along the way, please do not hesitate to enter them in, and we will get to them when we're able. But now I'm going to ask Arlene and Oscar to hop back on and introduce themselves before we get into the PowerPoint. Oscar, will go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Oscar Duran. I am currently my first semester of graduate school at California State University, Long Beach. I am doing a master's in counseling with an emphasis in student development and higher education. I did my undergrad studies at San Diego State University, where I got a BA in social science and a minor in counseling. I'm a community college transfer student. And I currently have 2 graduate assistantships at 2 community colleges, in a student equity office with Rio Hondo College, and at the TRIO Student Support Services program with Mount San Antonio College, in both in California, Southern California, LA area.
Hi, my name is Arlene, and my pronouns are they, them. I completed my bachelor's in history at Princeton, and I'm currently in my first year of a master's of social work program over at Columbia. And although I'm doing social work, it's like a focus on higher education. I have a graduate assistantship in LGBTQ programming and outreach at Multicultural Affairs at Columbia. And then my field placement is at City College in the Gender Resources program. So I do more counseling and confidential resources as well as programmatic things there.
Great. Thank you. And then again, I'm Spencer Long. I'm the Director of Leadership and Civic Engagement at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And we're going to start by doing an overview of a presentation called So You Want to Go to Graduate School. And this presentation is really just meant to be a overview of some things to consider as you are thinking about applying to various graduate programs across the country. The number one thing to kind of think about as you're starting this journey is to think about establishing a personal board of directors. And so what this means is it's a group of people that you can go to, almost like an advisory group. So if anybody participates in an advisory group for a college or an office, or you're part of a student government's an advisory group for the campus and for students to have a voice. The same thing's true for a personal board of directors. This is a group of other folks, could be peers, could be mentors, it could be other people that you trust. These are a group of people that you can go to when you have questions. Let's say you get, the best case scenario, you get accepted into like 4 graduate schools and you're not really sure which one to go to. This board of directors will help you think through that. But it's more of like an advisory group, a group that you can trust and think about. So as you're starting to think about applying to graduate school, something you should also think about is, do you have a personal board of directors? If you don't, who would they be? And then why would you select them to be on your board of directors? What are they going to be able to help with or contribute to when you think about applying to graduate school? So just a good backdrop to something to think about as you start that process. The second part to think about is the why. Why are you deciding to go to graduate school? There are lots of different paths that are available, and we'll talk about that. But I think it's really important to understand the why you want to go to graduate school. What are the things that you are hoping to gain from going to graduate school? What type of experience do you want to have when you go to graduate school? What are you hoping to gain, the type of degree, etc. So it's important to understand why you want to go to graduate school as you start this process. What can you be doing now as you get ready to start the graduate school process to set yourself up for success? I would say one of the first things that you've done, you're doing it. You are a NUFP fellow. You are part of NASPA, you're part of professional organizations, and you are getting some experience of working with a mentor. You're getting experience to go to conferences. You're getting experiences to try out a lot of different things. And so one of those things that you're doing right now is super successful. I wasn't enough. I wish I would even known enough experience existed when I was in school, although I didn't know that I wanted to go into student affairs so much later in the process. But such a great opportunity to connect with a group of caring professionals who want to help to see you succeed and are going to be there to advocate for you after. The other part is making sure you're maximizing the experiences you have on campus. One of the examples that I use, if you can see me on the webcam, is I always use my water bottle. So this is a campus housing water bottle from UIC here. But what I tell the people is currently there's water in here, but if I were to take it and dump it out, I would have water all over my keyboard. And then let's say I were to take this water bottle back downstairs and I were to fill it with Pepsi, because we're a Pepsi campus, I would have Pepsi, and the same thing would be true if I came out and I dumped it on my computer, on my keyboard here. I have Pepsi and water all over. So what you put into any of your experiences now are what you're going to get out. So if you're able, through a student organization experience, through employment, through an internship, through a research project, able to set yourself up for success in taking on some cool responsibilities or being part of a cool project, try to fill your water bottle with as many unique and cool experiences that are going to be able to help set you up for success and help you make informed decisions as you think about what might be next for you in your journey, and to think about the type of assistantship or type of full-time professional experience or whatever that you're looking for in your next step. This water bottle and these experiences will help shape and inform that process for you. The next part is shop around. Part of your NUFP experience is to find opportunities to connect with professionals outside of your mentor group. So if you are fortunate to be in a place where there are other types of institutions, there are other places that you can go and visit nearby. You can set up times to chat with people on the phone, over webinars, whatever else. Shop around, get lots of experience, talk with lots of people. The more opportunities you have to learn and grow, again, will help shape your experience and help you be informed about what type of experience that you're looking for. Do I want to be in a city? Do I want to be in a rural area? Do I want to work in a diverse institution? Do I want to work in a campus that's very, that serves one very special type of population? Again, you have to figure that out for you, but you need to be able to do that is to shop around, interview, and talk with folks. Again, take on what I call non-traditional professional development. So the experience I share with people is that I serve and always have as a volunteer for a nonprofit. I currently sit on the board of directors for a very large nonprofit here in Chicago, and I get experiences and have gotten experiences from the very beginning through my involvement with nonprofit work than I would ever have gotten to this point in my professional career. And so as I think about skills and abilities that I have, a lot of it is credited to professional development opportunities through nonprofit work that I would have never gotten at an institution. The other part to think about it is how you can be part of campus service opportunities. So is there an opportunity now to sit on a committee as a student that you might not get to do as a professional? Or can you be part of a planning process that you might not be able to do as a professional, young professional, but you can be at the table as a student? And I would challenge you to think about that as you go into your careers too, is to think about these opportunities that students have that not all young professionals have, that can help in that skill set building. And also, again, back, not to keep hitting on this, but back to inform that decision about what you want to do next. So for a lot of people, there is a big question about when to go to graduate school. Do I, one of the options that we talk about is a gap year. Do I take a year off and go do something else? Do I do an AmeriCorps? Do I work full time for a year? Do I just take a year to travel? A lot of opportunities exist about a gap year. The second option is you go right to graduate school, right out of undergraduate, and that's an opportunity that a lot of people do. And then a third option is to think about how I might be able to maybe go into full-time employment and have graduate school experience while you're doing that. I'm currently in that boat. I started a doctorate program, and so although I have my master's, I'm in a place where I'm back in graduate school, working on another degree and working full-time. They all have different pros and cons, but something to think about in that aspect. Something else to think about where, who, and what. As I talked about in a previous slide, think about, is location important to you? Do you want to stay close to home? Do you want to go to a completely other side of the state? Or country, state? Do you want to be at a specific type institution? Do you want to, again, think about location, think about type, program type. So do I want to be research-based? Do I want a specific degree focus? So do I want to go into social work? Do I want to go into counseling? Do I want something that student fares 100%? Do I want an experience that's going to be 100% cohort? So if you're not sure what a cohort is, cohort means that you go through a set of experiences together with a group of students. So you all take the same courses at the same time, and that you're part of that group throughout your entire experience. Now, where I went to graduate school, and we'll be able to hear about this from our students here in a little bit, but where I went through, it was not. I took classes when I wanted to take classes. There were about 3 or 4 other students that I took most of my classes with, but most of the time it was all on my own. And there's cons to that because I didn't have a network, a group of people to do things to, but I could take classes that I wanted to when I wanted to take them. I didn't have to wait for them to be sequenced in the program. Versus when you're in a cohort, you have a group of study group people, you have people that you spend all of your time with, and a group of professionals that once you graduate, you can go back and work with as well. Another thing to think about when you're researching your program type is, what are the program requirements? Do I take a comprehensive exam at the end? Do I write a thesis? Do I have a big project? What are the things that you have to do, and what are the program requirements? Do I have to have an assistantship? Do I not have to have an assistantship? Those types of things that are going to be involved. The faculty. Are the faculty 100% full-time and all they do is work in student affairs and teaching student affairs, or are your faculty also practitioners? When I worked at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse for a little bit, so an example there is almost their entire faculty group are full-time professionals, meaning director of housing, director of student unions, those types of things, that are also teaching a class in addition to. So you're getting some of that full-time experience and current events that are happening on the day-to-day, versus someone who is doing research. They have a lot of great knowledge, but you get that day-to-day experience through your assistantship. So again, you have to think about that. Think about institution type. So what type of institution do you want to go to? Big, small? Again, I went to the same institution for undergraduate and graduate school, which was unique because for me, my supervisor had to say, hey, you're a graduate student now, you're a full-time student, this is not an extension of your undergraduate career. And so thinking about how you make those intentional decisions about what you do as a graduate student versus if you go to a different school, what does that mean? It means, you're getting a completely different experience, but you're also building a lot of relationships that way. And then the last thing to think about in this area is affordability. So an assistantship is a opportunity to go to graduate school where you're working part-time, and the institution for that part-time work happens in a multitude of ways. You're either A, being subsidized by getting free school, and that's your assistantship. Some universities offer free school and a stipend, meaning that you're getting some money to help pay rent, those types of things. Some assistantships might be, hey, for 20 hours a week, we're going to cover your tuition and we're going to provide free housing and maybe a meal plan, but we're not going to pay you anything above that. So you have to really look into what you're able to afford and what type of experience that might look like. Also, if there are not those things, are there scholarships available, or what other ways can you get financial support to go to graduate school in that way? Again, where, who, what, continued. Again, program requirements, we talked a little bit about this, but think about the degree type. So again, counseling, those types of things, an assistantship or an internship. So as part of my graduate school, am I going to get one of those assistantships where you're paying me and I'm doing all this, or is part of that requirement going to also be an internship, meaning that I have to go and do an experience on my campus in another office, or go to another campus in town, or what does that look like? Is there a capstone? So again, is it a final? Is it a thesis? Is it a project? What are those things? What does the tuition look like? And is summer a requirement? For some graduate programs, they go through school all the way through summer. For other people, they only go during a traditional school year and you have the summer off. For some people, you have the option of taking summer school. So again, think about how much time you want to spend in this process. Do you want to get done as quickly as possible? Do you want to be part of that cohort where you're going through all these classes at the same time? What other opportunities might be afforded in the summer? Can I get a summer internship where I'm getting experience in another area? Can I work with a professional organization? Can I go home and just let my brain rest? You have to figure out what that means for you. Additional things to think about with institutional fit is, you know, is the institution going to be good for me personally? Is it geographically? You know, is it going to cost me $700 to fly home anytime I want to go home, or can I just drive an hour and be home? And what does that look like for you as you think about your family experience? Is it going to be good for me professionally? Am I getting an assistantship and experience that's going to help me? Am I working with people who are going to help me and mentor me? You know, how is this going to set me up for success after? You know, think about academic. Is this academically rigorous enough for me? Is the program in alignment with the things that I want to gain? It's really important to think about finances. How is the experience going to put you in so much debt that you're going to be paying for it much longer than the degree was worth, or are you getting an opportunity to advance yourself without a lot of that financial commitment? And then I think it's super important to think about culture and the culture of the institution and how you fit in, both personally and professionally. Is the culture at the university that I'm working all the time, that I don't get any, I'm working above my 20 hours, and so that is impacting my schoolwork. Culturally also, you know, I went to graduate school with some African American friends, and they couldn't find a barber to get their hair cut. Again, think about where you're going to graduate school, and if you're going to have all of the cultural needs that you need to be successful. Are there people that look like you and think like you, in addition to think differently than you, and make you expand your horizons a little bit in that way as well? Those are all important things to think about when you're thinking about the culture of an institution and the culture of where you're living. Are you going to be potentially the only person of color on the whole campus or in the whole community, or one of a very small population? And what does that mean? And are you okay with that? Lots of things to consider. And you have to understand it's more than just 2 or 3 years, right? This is an institution that you're going to have a lifetime relationship with because you're getting a degree from them, but also that's 2 or 3 years that could be really, really awesome or could be really, really challenging. And so making sure it's an experience that's going to be beneficial for you is super important. Some additional things to think about as you go through this journey. You know, are there admission deadlines? When do I have to apply by to be considered? Do I need to take the GRE? The GRE costs money. Do I have money set aside to take the GRE? What happens if I need to take it more than once because I didn't score as well as I wanted to? Those are all things to think about. Application fees. Almost every graduate program I know of comes with an application fee. So how are we using our resources or setting ourselves up to think about how we go about applying for graduate school? Are there interview days? So as part of my program, do I need to physically go to campus? And what's involved with that? Do I need to fly? Do I need to pay for hotel? Do I need to pay for food? What are all the things that go into going to an interview day? Because some campuses cover all those expenses for you, and some campuses cover none of those expenses for you. And so what are you able to afford, potentially with understanding that you might not get an assistantship or get into school there? Not to scare you, but I think these are all things that are you really need to think about as you apply to graduate programs. And then again, your senior year. So if this involves you in your senior year of undergraduate, you're having to spend a lot of time traveling in your spring semester. Are you taking classes or setting yourself up for success, understanding you still have to complete your undergraduate degree before going to graduate school? And so keeping in mind that we still want you to be successful. We still want you to get a lot out of that undergraduate experience before you take that step of going to graduate school, but understand it's a big time commitment to be applying for graduate school. Some things that you'll need to think about preparing: personal statements, cover letters, resumes. It's important those things are error-free. So how can you, if you've never written a personal statement, you've never written a cover letter, you've never written a resume, use your mentors as a resource. Use other professionals as a resource. Ask them how they work or set up personal statements. Ask them how they work and set up cover letters. Ask if you can see resumes. Use LinkedIn to see how other people list their experiences. And then use your mentors and other folks on campus as a resource to make sure that they are error-free. Make sure that you're using them to proofread, to make suggestions, all those other things that are going to help set you up for success. Additionally, think about letters of recommendations and people that you can list as references. In any graduate school application process, as I'm sure you're learning going into the process, they ask for letters of recommendation, people that can speak to your academic ability, that can speak to your professional ability, that your experiences that you bring, the type of person that you are. And most importantly, you want to make sure that these references are going to be positive and strong, because you may ask somebody, and this has happened to me, I've had people list me as references that I've had one relationship with, and I don't even have enough to speak about how they would be effective, or the experience I have with them wasn't the best. And so I can only speak to a negative experience versus positive and strong experiences. And so I think it's important to understand that when asking folks for letters of recommendation and references, is to make sure that they're going to be strong and positive. And that's also important about your experience that you're in now. If you have those relationships, ask for these things early. Don't ask for them the day before or the week before. Understand that people have other things on their plate. One of my mentors is getting ready, mentees is getting ready to apply for graduate school. He doesn't need his application stuff until December, but he asked for me for my letters of recommendation this week. So I have a couple months to think about it, and then I can build it into my planning of the work that I do day to day. Super important to think about as you navigate the process of applying to graduate school. And then also think about what is your professional brand. What is your professional reputation, not just now, but also think about what you want it to be. How are you in informal or peer situations? And understand that those are still just as important. People watch and see what you do both in formal leadership positions and in informal relationships, and to navigate and understand the type of person that you are. So don't underestimate that any experience. An experience that I had with my current supervisor is I asked him to lunch, had no idea that that day the person who was in my position before had given his letter of resignation because he had gotten another opportunity. My whole purpose of going to lunch with him was to understand a little bit more about his path, and also to explain to him that I was interested in that. Little did I know that that lunch really led into me being in my current position. So you never really understand how and when those conversations are going to happen. Also, think about those people who are around the room are eventually going to be your coworkers, and they might eventually be your boss. And so, or you might be hiring them. And so, what's your reputation? Do people want to come work for you? Do you want to work for them? Do you want to work in tandem with them? So again, it's important to understand how all of those relationships come into play. And then etiquette. Again, I can't stress this stuff enough. Accepting and declining a program role. If you're offered a position, offered an interview that you're really not interested in, you need to communicate that. I'll give you an example. I'm sitting on a search committee right now. I've emailed candidates to set up phone interviews, and people just didn't reply. So if you're really not interested or you've accepted something else, communicate that to people. You have to understand that you're not the only one that somebody's interviewing, and at the same time, they understand that they're probably not the only school that you're applying to as well. And so communication is key, because although you don't accept this position, later on down the road, you may want to accept a position, and there could be a bad taste in somebody's mouth if you haven't taken the time to communicate with folks. Send thank you notes after a phone interview, after an on-campus, if you have an opportunity to meet with a really cool mentor, to have a conversation with somebody, take the time to either physically handwrite a note or send a quick email saying, hey, I really enjoyed the time that you took out of your day today to talk with me about XYZ experience, and it really meant a lot to me. Thanks, take care, whoever. blah, 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 Spencer. Those little things go a long way. And then also work to stay in touch. There are still colleagues. This is my third campus, my third professional experience. And I still keep in contact with old colleagues, and they're all across the country at this point. Again, you don't know when or where or how those relationships are going to help you out down the road. And more likely than not, that you see people down the road at a NASPA conference, or you ask them to sit on a webinar for you, like we are today. I mean, students that have great experiences that you keep in touch with and you watch on Facebook or LinkedIn, or colleagues or whatever you keep in touch with that can come in to play. Deep breath. That was a lot. I know it's being recorded. You'll have it. But now I really want to bring in Arlene and Oscar to help bring this stuff to light, to get your questions answered, to do all those things. Just for full disclosure, Oscar does have to leave a little early to go to another work assignment, but we will do our best to answer any questions, and he has agreed that after, if people have specific questions for him, we will share contact information so he has them. So Oscar, do you want to go ahead and get us kicked off with any tips or tricks, or what of this stuff is true, not true, was different for you, so on and so forth?
Yeah, sure. No, everything that you mentioned, everything that PowerPoint has, I wish I would have had it when I was applying last year, but I mean, I had mentors that told me about this, right? But having an actual PowerPoint that breaks everything down in this webinar, I think is super important. So everything you talked about is definitely all things to consider. One of the most important things for me, I think, was really planning ahead, like really making time to do your research on, yeah, like you said, first of all, why graduate school, or what are you hoping to get out of it? But also where, like where do you want to pursue this new stage in life, because it's a super important part of your academic, professional, and personal development. So really knowing who you'll be sharing the next 2-3 years of your life is something that I think is very important to plan ahead. Definitely ask for those letters of recommendation early to give enough time for your recommenders to write strong letters. I would recommend when you ask, if they can write a strong letter of recommendation, because you do need someone that can really speak to your strengths, your assets, your attributes, what you can bring to a program. Hopefully somebody that you've been able to develop a relationship, and be intentional about who you ask. For example, I was an undergrad at San Diego State, and I thought of applying to the counseling program there. One of my letters of rec was the director for the minor counseling program, right? So she knew faculty and people within that program that I knew that if she wrote a letter for me for the program, it would make a difference. It would be more of an impactful letter. So be intentional of who you ask, and ask certain people that might have an influence. If someone reads the letter, they'll definitely take it more into consideration in some sort. And really also, if possible, getting to talk to some graduate students in that program, whatever program you're interested in. Reach out to some of the graduate students. A lot of them you might meet in conferences. If you're already going to some of these conferences and networking, which is extremely important, try to ask them about their experiences within the program and see, because they'll tell you the truth. They'll tell you straight up how the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. So really try to get connected with them beyond just the faculty and administrators. But yeah, that would be some of the most relevant tips I would give.
So I have a couple of tips written down, and I'll go over just like the technical ones first. If you're a low income and first generation student and you're applying to graduate school, think like very hard when an application requires you to pay a fee, because oftentimes those fees would be waived. And I didn't know that until I talked to my NUFP mentor when I was applying to graduate school. So sometimes you'll see an application that asks you for a $75 fee, but you can email the admissions office and say, I'm a student with high financial need. What do I need to do to get a waiver? Oftentimes they'll just waive the fee automatically, or if they require documentation, you can talk to your financial aid office to get, I think, what it's called like a statement of financial need to turn in. So that saves you a lot of money, because the GRE itself is very expensive. Another thing I want to echo is to really ask for your materials ahead of time, especially recommendations. And for those that aren't coming from a student affairs bachelor's experience, make sure to sit down with your recommenders and point out what you would like them to write about. So I did my bachelor's in history, and I was really struggling to think about how I would communicate to graduate programs, how a history focus will allow me to be a strong candidate for student affairs and for social work. And when I had to ask for faculty recommendations, I sat down with my professors and I asked them to point out key aspects of different papers I had written that had to do with universities or had to do with institutional oppression, to kind of relay how kind of like a non-traditional approach to student affairs would be my strength as an applicant. I also want to emphasize from the presentation to make a budget, especially if you're moving to a new place. I decided to move, I'm from Miami and I went to school in Jersey, and then I moved to New York for graduate school. And it was very important to talk to other folks from my undergrad who had moved to New York to get more of a picture of how much rent would be, whether I could decrease the amount of loans that the financial aid package set online to a few more loans, kind of like a more realistic living expenses for myself. And then just more on the personal advice, I think you should really sit down with current students to get their perspective, and don't be shy to ask admissions office to sit down with students from your identities. And you know, not everybody's experience is the same, but you can kind of gauge how a program is for students of color and for queer students, for trans students, by talking to current students, and really sit with yourself and ask why you're pursuing this degree. So we all have like our own trajectories of why we're going to graduate school. One of, you know, like the very practical reasons is that we need this degree to go on to different jobs, but really sit with yourself and say what you want to get out of this experience, because it is, you know, 2 years. It's not as long as a bachelor's, or it could be 2 to 3 years, but it's going to be very important to foster community to get through it, because it's difficult in a different way. You'll be practicing actively, and it's going to challenge you in a way that just doing coursework won't. And lastly, for students of color and for queer and trans students that are applying to grad school, it's going to be very important to find out who within the program is going to have your back. And especially for trans students, in light of recent news, you need to find out whether when you experience something negative within the program, who can you talk to, and are they well versed in different terminology and policies? And I would recommend looking for a dean of diversity within the program, or even looking and talking to students about what the precedent or history is for Title IX there. So when you experience, if you experience different forms of harassment, whether you're going to have a community to support you to get through that and care about your well-being.
Awesome. So there are a couple questions that have come up. The first one I really honestly don't know how to answer, so I'm curious your two recommendations. The first one was, do you recommend a CV or a resume for graduate school applications? And from my experience, I've only ever written a resume. I call it a resume. Some people use the terms interchangeably. I know that one has more academic focus around research and publications and things like that. For me, when I applied to graduate school, mine was a resume. But Arlene, Oscar, what's your experience around that?
I can definitely comment to that, because I think I was also struggling with that myself. I think I have a CV, more of a CV format, and I'll be more than welcome to share it with anybody once my contact information is shared. But a lot of the applications, they say either submit resume / CV. Some say submit a CV, some say submit a resume. So I think they're very interchangeable. From my own experience, I like I said, I kind of have more of a CV format, and I didn't have any problems with the institution that I applied to. But if you are having questions, you could always, call the office or wherever you're trying to apply and just clarify that. But most applications either say resume or CV or resume or just a CV. It just depends.
Yeah, I also had more of a CV format, and I think it depends on what you want to highlight. If you know the program you're applying to is more research focused, a CV might be a better option to communicate different research or presentation experience that you have. I think either would be fine. I think just try and decide what you want to get across and whether a resume would be a better format or a CV would be a better format. And if you want an example, I'll also be happy to share mine.
Yeah, that's another thing I think, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of the application, beyond obviously the CV and the resume, is the statement of purpose.
Yeah.
Because there you actually get to really talk about everything that's on that CV or the resume. So that statement of purpose, really, really take your time, focus, get it revised over and over and over by as many mentors as you can. Just really try to, whichever institution you're applying to, if it's various multiple institutions, even if it's the same graduate, like student affairs or program, each institution kind of has a mission statement, and the program itself does too. So really align it to reflect some of their goals and values that they're looking for in an applicant. So really take your time to make sure that it's compatible with the program you're looking to apply to.
Yeah, now that we're talking about personal statements, a pro tip is that you don't have to write a personal statement for each college. So you're going to have kind of your template about what your story is and why you're going into the student affairs field or another program like social work or counseling. And then you switch out 1 or 2 paragraphs that are school specific. So make sure to go on the school's website and look at what curricula they offer, to look at what their mission is, what research opportunity and faculty they have. And those paragraphs, you switch it out per program. But you want to write, just focus your energy on writing 1 template for your personal statement.
Thank you. The second question, which we'll get to at the end, was about if the webinar is being recorded, and the answer is yes, and it will be emailed out to everybody who registered for the webinar. There are some people who weren't able to even be here for the live webinar, and so they signed up to get the recording after, but we will have this. And also, I want to remind everyone in the handouts area, I pulled it up on the screen to share, but there is a handout and helping think about what things are important to you when you start applying for graduate school. This was a resource that was shared at the Dungy Leadership Institute this last summer that has been super helpful, that I found really helpful. Is it's like a little box here. And so what are the things that you absolutely need from your graduate school experience? What are the things that you want, and what would be icing on the cake? Like, what are the above and beyond that would be great if it had? And you'll see some things to think about down here in consideration. Some of those things we talked about. One thing I didn't talk about, we talked about location, but I didn't think about weather and climate. If you can't do snow, probably shouldn't come to Chicago. But if you want to come to Chicago because you want like a super diverse experience, then maybe that's where you put into a need. On the second page, again, this is really important, is that you're probably going to be applying to more than 1 program. So making sure you have a good, I'd be curious, Arlene and Oscar, your experiences applying to several programs, how you kept track of all of that information. Yeah. There's a lot to keep track of as you apply to graduate school. So this is a Word document, which means that it is fillable and you can adjust it. So what's the name? Where is it located? School size, urban, rural, degree type, name of program, cohort size, is there a GPA requirement, the GRE required, and then other notes. So again, just kind of keeping track of all of that stuff. Every school has a different application deadline. So what all works for you when you were applying for these programs?
Yeah, no, definitely. I had an Excel, a spreadsheet like that pretty much. And I started off with 10 programs, but I ended up narrowing it down to 5. So I applied to 5 programs, and it was really hard. But yeah, I would say start with the more the better. Have lots of options, and then really focus your energies on those schools that you really see yourself going to or being in. But definitely a spreadsheet like that is extremely helpful.
Yeah, I also had a similar spreadsheet, and I started off with 10 programs also, and I narrowed it down to 6. And I think really decide when it's so hard to narrow down programs sometimes because you can might maybe see yourself at whichever program, but make sure you know whether you will or want to go to a rural setting or an urban setting. It was really important for me to be in a city, and that helped me narrow down a lot of the different options. Or if you think that it's important to have like a foundations course for your curriculum that focuses on race, then look in the curriculum and see whether that's going to focus, or if affinity groups are important to you, look at the student organizations offered through that program, and that will also help you narrow it down. Oh, I don't think we can hear you, Spencer.
It's because I was muted. Thank you. There was another question that was submitted. If you were taking a gap year, do you have any tips on staying connected to your personal board of directors? Either of you, I know both of you went right into graduate school after, but would you have any tips about staying in touch with the board of directors?
So one thing I do now to stay in touch with my different mentors is to update them when things are going well. So oftentimes I'm like running to them when I need help. That was kind of like the highlight of my undergrad career for mentors. But when I started my program, I actually emailed both of my NUFP mentors, different faculty, and I was like, thank you, because I feel like I'm in the right place to be learning things that I need to learn to develop personally and professionally. So don't forget to email them when things go well. And also when you have questions. I think that a lot of times we think that when we finish undergrad, those mentorship relationships are cut off, but these individuals have gone through various experiences, undergrad, grad school, different professional experiences. And if there's a question that arises during your gap year and you want their advice, I'm sure they'll be like more than happy to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely. I think to continue to foster those relationships, to continue to strengthen them. I mean, I think Spencer, you were mentioning, this is student affairs and higher ed. It's a small world, so you definitely want to make sure that you don't burn any bridges, because you never know in the future, who you'll be running into, who you'll be working with. Regarding the gap year, I mean, if you have to take a gap year, if you feel like you're not ready for graduate school yet, that's fine. That's fine. It's perfectly fine to recognize that, to realize that. I would say a lot of people in my cohort, where I'm in right now, a lot of them took 1, 2, 3 gap years, and within those years, they actually strengthened their CV and resume and their experiences, so that by the time they applied to graduate school, they were really strong candidates. So there's nothing wrong with taking some time off, as long as you're putting in work during that time off, to be where you want to be in the future. So just keep that in mind. And part of putting in that work is to continue to build those relationships with your team, with your mentors. Definitely build yourself a good team behind you, because you can't do this alone. It's extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Oscar, you have to leave soon, but I'm hopeful maybe you can stick around for one more question. I think you might, both of you might have experience with this, about how did you go about choosing reference writers if your undergraduate program was not related to the field of student affairs? So I don't believe either of you had undergraduate programs in student affairs, but this is even more interesting. Many of my professors are not native English speakers because they majored in Spanish. So do you have any recommendations about how you reached out to people to write letters of recommendation, how you picked them, how you explained what you were doing? And then if you had any things around language barriers. I have some thoughts, but I want to make sure you all can talk about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I got, like I said, my BA in social science. So actually, when I'm thinking about it, none of my recommenders were from my program as an undergrad. All my letters were mainly from mentors that I was able to connect with outside of my undergraduate degree. One of them for sure, definitely use your NUFP mentor. Mm-hmm. I think they can be a very strong letter of rec. If you have been going to conferences or been part of fellowships, if you do internships, any type of scholarship that exposes you with other faculty or administration that you can possibly build a relationship with, and they could be your letters of rec in the future. It's always just the people that you work with the most, that know you the most as a student, as a person, as an individual. So that's what I would have to say regarding that.
Yeah, while I was asking for my recommendations, I found it very important to explain to individuals what student affairs is, because many of them, if they weren't working in student affairs, they had a lot of questions about what the field was. And if they're working in a university, it actually makes it easier because they're connected with student affairs professionals. They might just not know it, because all universities have forward-facing student affairs professionals that they've interacted with once or twice. And I also found it very important to say certain keywords that I think would benefit the recommendation letter they were writing. So if they weren't within social work or they weren't within student affairs, then I sat down with them and I communicated to them like what the core values of social work are, and that it's very important to talk about institutional oppression and social positionality. So if you know certain keywords that these programs are repeating over and over again on their sites, you make a list for them and say, like, this is what I see that they're saying. I think you should talk about this. Or if you even see connections about your interactions with your recommender that you think would be fruitful to include in the recommendation, it's also like a very good idea to just write it in an email or to meet with them in person and say, remember that time in class when we read this text and like it resonated with me and I wrote this paper? I think this is part of my trajectory to going to grad school, because it kind of let me know that I was interested in this topic and this is how it relates. So if you're willing to have like an open conversation with your recommenders about what your trajectory to grad school is and what made you realize that you wanted to go to this program, it will make their experience of writing a recommendation for you a lot easier.
And I do have to go, but I just wanted to say, thank you, and hopefully you all got something positive out of this. And Spencer will share my contact information, and if anybody wants to reach out, you're more than welcome to. Good luck with the applications, good luck in everything you're doing, and just keep doing what you're doing, keep moving forward.
Thank you, Oscar. Arlene, we have another question. And then I can help with this as well. How important is a recommendation from a professor? Can they all be student affairs professionals?
So I think certain programs will outline whether they want a faculty member. And the programs I was applying to, everyone wanted at least one faculty letter. I think whether you decide how many faculty letters and how many student affairs professional letters you have depends on your personal relationship with these recommenders and also on the type of program. So if you see that the program is more research-based, you might want to have 2 faculty letters and 1 student affairs letter. But if you see that it's more practitioner-based, maybe you'll decide to have 2 student affairs letters and 1 faculty letter. So definitely check the requirements of whether they require a faculty letter. And also, sit down with these recommenders. I'm all about like face-to-face contact. I think you should sit down and have a face-to-face meeting or like a video chat meeting with all recommenders, and that will help you decide which recommender is a good fit for which school. So if you have to have 3 recommendations for you might have like 5 or 6 recommenders, or you might have 2 or 3 recommenders, and you get to decide that. So if you know that a recommender went to a specific institution that you're applying to, it would be a good idea, like Oscar said, to have them write that recommendation letter. But we oftentimes don't talk about recommender to program fit. Like if a recommender has the core values of a program you're applying to, their recommendation will probably speak to that selection committee more than another recommender, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing. It really does depend on the program, what the requirements are. Even though I'm not a full-time faculty member, or I adjunct from time to time, but I'm not a full-time faculty member. So I will always ask students when I write letters of recommendation if there are any academic achievements that I should highlight, right? Because you still you're still getting admitted to a graduate level school program. I mean, obviously they'll be able to see your grades and things like that, but if you don't have somebody who can speak to your academic abilities, it may put some question marks out there. So again, I think it's important to understand like what they're hoping that they, being the admissions group, is trying to gain from your application. Is it important to have the academic component? Is it not? But how do you speak to your ability to do well in the classroom? I mean, I think people forget a lot of times the classroom is probably just as important, if not more important, than the assistantship when it comes to learning content. They both have their pros and cons, but you still are there to go to school. So I think faculty
Yeah.
members and academic programs want to be able to speak, be able to have you speak to that as well. I mean, they'll see that through your grades, through your GRE, through your success in your undergraduate experience. That's why that's just as important. But you can have someone saying, yes, you know, Arlene, they're a pretty kick-butt student, and you want to have them in the program, and they're going to help elevate the status of your program, and they're going to help contribute to your research and all of those types of things. That's going to go a long ways to help you get in the program as well.
And if you feel,
we have about, yeah, go ahead.
And if you feel that you don't have connections with faculty that are strong, also think about different trainings or presentations that you've done, because those are also academic. The definition of research is really large. So if you don't have a faculty member you're really close to and you really want to include like 3 practitioner letters, then sit down with one of them and say, I really want your perspective as a practitioner, but I also need you to speak about my research experience or my academic experience.
Yeah. So we have about 5 minutes left. I have one closing slide, but Arlene, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to be here with us and to share your experience. Thank you to all of the NUF mentors and NUF fellows who are part of this, both now and later. We hope that you took this away. We'll be working with the NAFPA office to make sure that you have all of our email contact information if you want to follow up with any of us afterwards. But in closing, I want to share, back to the slides here, a top 10 final words of advice as you think about going into your graduate school search. Know yourself, do your research, cast a wide net, define your why. Grad school is the beginning, not the end. Set your non-negotiables, create your own experience, challenge your comfort zone, don't sell yourself short, and be strategic about mentorship. And that, I hope that last bullet stays with you. We're actually working on some additional webinars for the later in the school year that'll be specifically around mentorship. And so we hope you'll join us with that. But definitely top 10 things to recap and think about as you go into this graduate school search. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to Arlene and Oscar for their time and being with us today. And we hope to see you down the road at a regional or national conference, or be a colleague with you someday into the future. But for now, thank you and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Good luck.